don't know, but that's what we do. So there should be interest. But if you want to have the premiums as a result of being a family, that's the sense.
So, well, I wouldn't hear that sure, because I know that speech. Linda probably told that too, right? I'm the fill-in for coordinating.
All rise. 60 Bishop Court now resumes. You may be seated.
We got back on the record, people, the Jeffrey Thomas Willis, file number 16180-186FY. Are the parties ready?
Yes, Judge.
Mr. House? Mr. Hilson, you may call your next witness.
Thank you. People of the state of Michigan call Michelle Schmidt to the stand.
Matter of fact, before this court, you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Have a seat, state your name for the record.
My name is Michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E, Schmidt, S-C-H-M-I-T-T.
Ms. Schmidt, what department do you work for?
I work for the Michigan State Police, the biology unit in the Grand Rapids Laboratory.
And how long have you worked in the biology unit?
I've been employed with the Michigan State Police in the biology unit for approximately 3.5 years.
And can you just briefly go over with the court your training and experience as it relates to what you do in the biology unit?
Prior to coming to the Michigan State Police, I was a DNA analyst for the city of New York for approximately 7 years. And then I came to the state of Michigan, and as a biologist and DNA analyst for the Michigan State Police, I examine evidence for the possibility of biological material like blood, semen, or saliva. I prepare DNA samples. I complete DNA analysis, write reports, and testify as needed. I have a bachelor's degree from Grand Valley State University in biology. I have a master's degree in forensic molecular biology from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
Have you testified as an expert before in this field, both, I guess, in New York and here in Michigan?
Yes, I have. I've testified over 50 times in both the state of New York, in Michigan, and in New Jersey.
And you also carry specialized training for, I guess, the way the state police analyzes mixture or complex mixture samples. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Could you explain to the court what that certification is?
I've become competent to do complex mixtures using a statistical program called StarMix. And to become competent in that, I took a week-long lecture from the developers of that, and it was actually developed in New Zealand by that DNA laboratory. I then did practice samples. I submitted samples that we did for our validation. I did a written test, and I performed that on casework.
And have you had an opportunity to testify as it relates to that special certification in court as an expert as well?
Yes, I have. I've testified on StarMix cases in the state of Michigan, and I also testified using the basis of that, which is likelihood ratios, in the state of New York.
Your Honor, I move to assign or make Michelle Schmidt an expert in the area of forensic biology, as well as her use of likelihood ratios in the STAR mix program for complex mixture sampling.
All right, repeat that for me one more time.
Sorry, Judge.
I got the forensic biology
All
part.
right. I'd also ask the court to qualify, that's the word I was looking for, qualify her as an expert in the area of STAR mix and the use of likelihood ratios as it pertains to complex mixture DNA sampling.
All right, STAR mix ratio.
Likelihood ratio.
Likelihood ratio as it applies to complex
Complex
mixtures.
mixture DNA sampling.
All right, Mr. Hostiga.
For purposes of this exam, Judge, I'm not going to.
All right, there being no objection, then I'll receive Michelle Schmidt as an expert under MRE 702 in the area of forensic biology and STAR mix likelihood ratio as it applies to complex mixture DNA samples. Is that right?
It's just another way of performing statistical analysis on mixtures of DNA.
Great. Then that's where she'll be admitted as an expert.
Perfect. Thank you, Judge. Could you explain to the court what a likelihood ratio is and how you use it?
A likelihood ratio is basically just a way that we can perform statistical analysis on complex mixtures or on just single source samples of DNA. It's where you're looking at the evidence from the sample. So you're looking at the DNA profile that is determined from the sample, and you're making two different hypotheses to see which hypothesis or proposition explains the DNA that's detected better. So it's basically a likelihood ratio is if you think of it as a fraction. So you have the first hypothesis would be the top of the fraction, and the second hypothesis would be the bottom of the fraction. So depending on what the evidence would be after you detect it, it's which one of those describes it better. And you can use all available data in the sample for the statistical calculation. So an example would be is if I had a two-person DNA mixture, the first hypothesis would be it would be the person of interest, and one unknown, unrelated person would be the source of that DNA based on what was detected. So that would be at the top of the fraction. The bottom half of the fraction would be that it's from two unknown, unrelated people. And you're really just looking to see, does the top half of the fraction describe the DNA detected better, or does the bottom half describe it better? And if the top half, if it was hypothesis 1, being a person of interest in one unknown person, that part of the fraction would be larger. If it was better described as originating from two unknown, unrelated people, the bottom half of the fraction would be better. So you're basically just comparing two scenarios and how they better or worse describe the data.
Now, for the purposes of your participation in this particular investigation, and just some leniency here, Judge, because we're calling her out of order, just to put it in context for the court and for Mr. Hostiga. My understanding, Ms. Schmidt, is that you were given a DNA profile from one of your fellow lab analysts, David Hayhurst. Is that correct?
David Hayhurst did the DNA work on the sample. I did the statistical analysis, so I also looked at the DNA profiles that he was able to detect from his original DNA analysis. However, I was able to use the statistical program to provide a statistic in regards to people related to this case.
And in particular, and again, I apologize, I just so the court's aware and Mr. Hostiga is aware, we're talking about a pair of Reebok black gloves that was discovered in the toolbox already marked as People's Exhibit 75. And just so the court is aware, 75, that exhibit contains all the elements that were collected from that toolbox. One of those items is a pair of Reebok gloves. So that's what we're talking about here, Judge and Mr. Hostiga.
Thank you.
Now,
I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 91. I already previously showed this to Mr. Hostica prior to us starting up just now. Is this a report that you authored in regards to using the Star Mix program?
Yes, it is. My signature is on the last portion of page 4.
And could you tell the court, did you have a known sample of a person by the name of Rebecca Bletch?
Yes, I did.
All right. So that was part of your statistical analysis.
Yes, it was.
And I guess, if I could have that real quick, I want to just kind of have you focus in on, it would be page 3 of that report in reference to the exterior swab of the Reebok glove. Okay?
Okay.
Uh,
I can use my copy.
all right, fair enough. Now, could you explain to the court now, based on this specific piece of evidence, what you did as far as the likelihood ratio for that item?
So I'm now reading from page 3 of my report dated September 19th, 2016, and that was under laboratory number GR16-2492, and that's the third page of that. So when David Hayhurst, I received all the electronic data to look at the DNA profile, determine the number of contributors, and then make comparisons using the knowns from a number of related individuals to this case. Once I looked at the electropherogram, which is the graph of the DNA, which is our output of DNA analysis, I was able to determine that this was a mixture from multiple contributors, and I interpreted as a 2-person mixture. I then compared all the associated individuals to that 2-person mixture, and I used the likelihood ratio program Star Mix. It's STRMIX. And I then was able to get the likelihood ratio and then report that in my report.
Now, and I'm glad you said that, because you also had, for comparison purposes, a known sample from Jessica Heeringa. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The next female is a minor, so we're using her initials MJN. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. You also had knowns from Jeffrey Willis,
That's correct.
Kevin Bloom,
That is correct.
Charlene Willis,
That is correct.
and a Michelle Chantella.
That is also correct.
Okay. Just so that we're clear on what you had. All right, so were you able to come up or answer one or both of the hypotheses for the exterior profile of the glove?
So each time I compared one of those known, using a known swab for a DNA profile from each of those individuals listed by the prosecutor, I made the hypothesis for H1, so the top of the fraction, is the DNA from the swab of the Reebok glove exterior is more likely from, the first one I did was from Rebecca Bletch and one unknown individual, or I compared that to my second hypothesis would be, or is that DNA from the swab of the Reebok glove, is it more likely that it's from 2 unknown, unrelated people? So based on the DNA that we saw in that DNA profile from the Reebok glove, is the data better described as originating from Rebecca Bletch and 1 unknown person, or is it better described as originating from 2 unknown, unrelated people? And when I did that comparison, it was based on the DNA obtained for the swab of the Reebok glove exterior. It is at least 90 quadrillion times more likely that it originated from Rebecca Bletch and 1 unknown, unrelated individual compared to if it was from 2 unknown, unrelated individuals. And that analysis provided very strong support that Rebecca Bletch, is a contributor to that DNA typing results from the swab of the glove, the Reebok glove exterior.
Now, before we get to the second part of that analysis, real quick, your report contains a chart with a list of numbers. Could you explain to the court what that means?
So once we calculate a likelihood ratio, we do provide a qualitative equivalent. And in that chart, we have, if the likelihood ratio is 0, it would be an exclusion. So it would be dividing by 0, basically, so an exclusion. 0 to 99 would be uninformative. 100 to 999 gives moderate support that that person could be a contributor to the mixture. 1,000 to 9,999 would be strong support, and anything with a likelihood ratio greater than 10,000 indicates very strong support that that person could be a contributor to the mixture. In this case, the number was 90 quadrillion, which is very strong support.
Now, you also compared the profile that you saw on the exterior of the Reebok glove to the known profile of Jeffrey Willis, is that correct?
That is correct.
And could you describe to the court what you did for that comparison?
So that comparison was set up in the same manner that I compared the DNA profile of Rebecca Bletch. And in this instance, it was hypothesis 1, or the top half of that fraction, is going to be the DNA from that swab of the Reebok glove exterior is from Mr. Jeffrey Willis and one unknown, unrelated individual, or is the DNA that's detected on that swab of the Reebok glove, is it better described as originating from 2 unknown, unrelated people? And in this case, based on the DNA typing results for the swab of the Reebok glove exterior, it was at least 47 million times more likely that the DNA, that Jeffrey Willis and one unknown individual were contributors compared to 2 unknown, unrelated individuals. And again, it was very strong support that Jeffrey Willis is a contributor to the DNA typing results of the swab of the Reebok glove exterior.
And the report that I showed you, which is People's Exhibit 91, did it appear to be your report on this issue in its entirety? Were there any changes or differences from your original report?
There did not appear to be any changes. The other comparisons to that, I did compare the DNA profiles from Jessica Heeringa,
The
juvenile, Kevin Bloom, Charlene Ann Willis, and Michelle Shanotola, and they were all excluded as possible contributors.
Your Honor, based on her testimony that the People's 91 references that report, I move for its admission.
I won't object to the submission for purposes of this preliminary exam.
Right, there being no objection, 91 will be received.
One somewhat unrelated question, but given that you're in the forensic science business, can you tell the court the effect of bleach on trace evidence like blood and saliva and DNA? What does bleach do?
Bleach?
Yes.
Bleach will typically kill DNA or destroy it. I mean, when we're cleansing our bench top, we use bleach to clean instrumentation, and it kills DNA, destroys it.
Thank you. Judge, did you want to see 91, or are you good?
I'll take a look at it, but I'm going to rely on her testimony, basically. Given the analysis, there's strong support that Rebecca Bletch was a contributor, and there's strong support that Jeff Willis was a contributor. But I'll examine the report as well.
I have no further questions of Ms. Schmidt.
Right, Mr. Hostica, cross.
Good afternoon.
The DNA that you used for a comparison was provided to you by Detective Akers? I'm not sure he's...
He's a forensic scientist. Some of the DNA profiles were provided. For example, I actually did the DNA analysis and work on Rebecca Bletch's DNA profile. That was actually a DNA profile I did the work on.
Okay. As far as the gloves go, do you know what form, what the DNA was taken from, what it was?
I didn't do the original examination of the gloves. What do you mean, what form?
Was it blood? Was it saliva? Was it sweat? Where did it come from? Was that ever determined, if you know?
That would have been determined in Dave Hayhurst's report.
Okay, so you don't
So I don't know the origin of that, correct?
know. And how long does it typically take DNA to degrade so it cannot be compared?
It depends. If it's stored under proper conditions, DNA can be sustained for many, many years. However, if something's left in the sun, perhaps if it's washed or laundered, or if there's some outside, it could be destroyed, but it's possible that it could last for many, many years.
Okay, if it's kept in a controlled environment specifically to preserve it many, many years, right? Or could it be anyway?
I mean, you could find DNA profiles. I mean, if you just had something packed away in a box or a kit, there could be DNA that if it's not exposed to sunlight, it's not exposed to harsh weather conditions, DNA can persist. I mean, I don't know of a time limit for that.
Does it vary depending on what it is we're talking about, like blood versus bone, or something like that?
I mean, there's different, again, it's more the environmental factors that are going to contribute to it, not necessarily what type of biological material it would be. Because there could be a blood stain from a case in the 1970s, and I could get a full DNA profile from that. Or there could be a bone that's been outside, that a DNA profile could still be obtained from that, depending on how it was preserved or what type of environmental factors it was subjected to.
The blood you could find out if it happened that long ago, because assuming it would have been preserved in evidence somewhere, right? Not if it was exposed to the elements or just sitting around someone's house, I'm assuming.
I'm not understanding what you mean by preserved.
Well, did you say you could analyze blood from the 1970s?
It's possible, yeah, you can.
Okay. If it's just left open to the elements, that's possible?
You may not get a full DNA profile, but you may be able to get some profile from it. I mean, it's all dependent, but it is possible you could get a DNA profile from something that was exposed to the elements. It's less likely, but it's possible. I mean, I've worked on many cold cases in almost a 10-year career where we've gotten DNA from cases from the 70s or 80s that we've been able to get DNA profiles from evidence. And some of that's been preserved in evidence storage bags. Some of that's been new evidence that's been uncovered years later. Some of it hasn't been stored in the best conditions, but DNA profiles we did still have the ability to get at least a partial DNA profile from old stains or old samples.
Thank you very much.
I have nothing else.
And I have no questions. Thank you very much. Is the witness excused?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir.
You can stand down. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, a quick sidebar.
Yeah.
All right, so gentlemen, just to summarize the sidebar, Mr. Hilson indicates there's approximately 6 more witnesses,
Yes.
and Mr. Hoska has a potential witness or some evidence to present.
Yes.
It's apparent to me that we will not conclude this matter today by 5 o'clock, and it's been a long day, and so we're going to have to pick this up next week. I'm clearing my docket Monday afternoon. We'll cancel everything else on the docket, so we'll begin Monday at 1:30 p.m. And we'll, as I said, reconvene here Monday at 1:30 p.m. So we're adjourned until that time. Mr. Wilson?
All right.